Hi, I'm Professor Kate Heppell, working for the Chilterns Chalk Streams Project and seconded from Queen Mary University of London.
Professor Heppell, or should I say Kate, thank you for talking to the Affinity Water podcast series today. One of 3 we're recording on river health in our catchment areas. Where are we?
We're at Restore Hope Latimer, which is a charitable organisation on the banks of the River Chess, and we're in the middle reaches of the River Chess, which flows from Chesham to Rickmansworth.
The River Chess itself, it's just to our right, but it is straddled by countryside and roads too.
Yeah, it makes it a very interesting river. It has its source in an urban area in Chesham, and then it flows through an area of more rural activity, of land use that is a combination of livestock grazing and arable agriculture. And then it flows to the River Colne, that's at Rickmansworth as well, so it flows back into another urban area as well. And as you say, there are road networks throughout the catchment as well.
And you can hear the traffic on the road nearby. I mean, that must introduce pollutants to the river.
Yes, there are various areas where we know that road runoff occurs and we have sediment being moved into the river system as a result of that road runoff.
Would you say that this is a healthy river?
It's lots of good ecological status from the Water Framework Directive, so it's not without its problems, this river. There are issues due to flow and issues due to high phosphate concentration, amongst others as well.
But it looks so healthy. As I am walking by this river, I'd say, well, I can see the gravel bed, there's a fast flow. I think I could even drink from it.
I wouldn't advise that. It does look a lovely river, doesn't it? And chalk streams are characterised by clear water, and that's because they're groundwater fed. So the majority of their flow comes from the ground, and that water's obviously been filtered through soil and through rocks. And that gives these chalk rivers their character, really, and the reason why they're so valued.
Now, there's population growth in modern Britain. We're going to need more water, more homes, even though there are plans to reduce the water consumption of households by legislation now in the new Environment Bill going through Parliament. Is there over-abstraction of the water from the chalk streams?
So these rivers are classified as being over-abstracted in the Chilterns area, so there are activities underway to try and reduce that abstraction. It has led, I think, to low flow issues.
How is that improving in the future? Do you think that the combination and collaborations that are taking shape round river health will make a difference?
We hope so. I mean, we've got to consider flows in the long term. The flows will change in these river systems due to climate change and due to population growth as well. So we have a multiple complex system that's going to impact these rivers into the future. So we do all need to work as a partnership to address these issues.
And those partnerships, they involve citizen science.
Yes, that's one part of the partnerships. I think we'll be working all together as water companies, regulators, as conservation organisations, for example, and public as well. So citizen science initiatives which help to monitor and understand these river systems better. We're just walking along the side of the River Chess now towards our water quality sensor that we've had in the river for the last 2 years now, and it records aspects of water quality every 15 minutes in the river system, so it's like a real-time water quality sonde.
Yeah, I can just see it now. This is a lovely fast-flowing chalk stream that we're by, some railings as well to lean over and rest my equipment on, but it looks like a giant bottle.
It does. It's like a cylinder, isn't it, with a series of sensors at the end of it. Can you see the grill at the end of it? The cylindrical grill, and inside that there's sensors that are measuring aspects of water quality. And you can see that this sensor is surrounded by vegetation in the river as well. So just downstream of it we have a lovely stand of ranunculus. So that's a really important ecosystem engineer, we call it, in these river systems. It modifies flow. It's a great habitat as well for things like blackfly larvae that process organic matter in the river system. At the banks of the river as well, we have watercress. That's dying back now. So we're out here in the winter time. But all these aspects contribute to the ecosystem and the health of the river system as well.
Are we talking green planet, David Attenborough?
I think
here?
we are. We're talking about all of the plants in the river system, yes, and the way that they are indicators of ecosystem health and how important they are to the river system as well.
And how intricate is river system health? Does the public realise?
Yeah, when we think about river health, we really have to combine aspects of the physical habitat. So I'm talking here about the shape of the river channel. and how that's affected by human activity. I'm talking about the nature of the material on the riverbed. These are all part of the physical habitat. I'm talking about the flows in the river system and how those flows interact with the water quality and how they interact with the natural parts of the river system, the plants that we can see, for example, and the fish and the invertebrates. And understanding all those aspects is part of understanding the ecosystem and then understanding ecosystem health.
And your monitoring system, is it AI connected? Would you be able to look at your digital watch and see what river flows are like here? Is it that techie?
It is.
It is?
It is, yes. So these systems can be connected by telemetry to your mobile phone or to an iPad so that you can actually see what the water quality is doing and what the flows are doing in real time as well. So in the future, I think we should be using more of these networked together to look at river health and look at water quality and to be able to then help create predictive models of what's happening in response to, for example, climate change and population change in our catchments.
And how much data do you have? Presumably you couldn't do monitoring like this 5 years ago.
You could do monitoring like this 5 years ago. You couldn't get it connected to your phone in quite the same way. So I think now the power is being able to create networks of these types of sensors. And also now we have sensors created for lots of different water quality parameters. So for example, we can now look at dissolved organic matter in the river systems as well. So we can look at carbon processing, for example, in ways that we couldn't do in the past.
And could I just venture an opinion saying this chalk stream that we're standing by at Latimer Park, amazingly healthy to me. It's fast flowing. We can see the gravel on the riverbed. As you said, we can see vegetation and identify it. Doesn't seem anything wrong to me. Is that too simplistic?
Yeah, unfortunately, just by looking at the clarity of water in a river system and looking at the plants like this, we can't...
And the fast flow?
And the flow, we can't really get a picture of what the river... I mean, this is during a period of fairly high groundwater levels, so we've got good flow in the river system. If you'd been back here maybe a year ago, you'd seen a very different picture. So these things change over time as well, and understanding that temporal pattern is really important. A snapshot of a river at one point in time and assessing it in that way is not a good way of assessing river health. We do need to have long-term monitoring of these types of systems to understand them fully.
And so, in terms of complexity, what can the data in that large bottle tell us?
Yeah, so it can start to tease out what's happening with regards to changes in flow as a result of different rainfall patterns and different abstraction activities within the catchment. It can start to tell us how those things affect water quality, and we found it particularly interesting to understand dissolved oxygen dynamics in the river. Oxygen dynamics are critical to fish health, for example, and they also link to the nutrient status of the river as well. This river has quite high phosphate concentrations, for example. When you have high nutrient concentrations, like high phosphate concentrations, you get eutrophication of the system, algal blooms. And those algal blooms can affect oxygen status. That oxygen status, in turn, can affect fish health. So in this way, you can see these links between flow, water quality, and the ecology of the river system as well.
And fish health is key, isn't it? Because it's fishermen who've led the campaign to clean up our rivers because they're used the most and know over time how they've deteriorated. But numbers of fish species in our rivers, do we know? Do we monitor it?
We are monitoring. The Environment Agency is monitoring that, and we do understand the changes in the fish populations, but there are questions as to why fish populations and biodiversity have changed in different river systems as well. And for example, the role of temperature changes is starting to be questioned as well. So there are, again, lots of different reasons why fish populations and diversity might be changing in a river system. And I think what's heartening as well is it's now not just fishermen that are interested in these river systems. As we said before, it's the sort of the wild swimming agenda, and people are interested in rivers for reasons of mental health as well, and all of these are coming to play. So we're not just focusing on one species in a river, we're focusing on multiple fish species, but also all the other components of the river system that are really important to a healthy river.
And that's the result of the COVID lockdowns as well. We've been walking by rivers, we've been valuing our local communities and facilities, including the rivers more. So there's something galvanising around citizens' panels and rivers, isn't there? Can you tell us about those movements?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, this sensor in the river was put about as part of a citizen science initiative. We were approached by the River Chess Association, who wanted to have their own set of data on the river system and become involved in understanding that water quality and in monitoring that water quality. So we're seeing lots of citizen science groups getting involved, or citizen science groups getting started to better understand river systems. Some of these initiatives have been going for quite a while. So, for example, on the River Chess, I've had groups of citizens carrying out riverfly activities where they actually have monitoring sites and look at different riverfly species in the river. And they've been going for 10 years now. So some of these are really long-standing initiatives. And then I think we're seeing a sort of, yes, as you said, a galvanisation of people wanting to get involved and understand their rivers more and monitor different aspects of the river. Not just monitor, but also contribute to plans. So some of the really exciting citizen science initiatives are what I would call bottom-up. They come from people actually being concerned about the river and wanting to put something right and collecting a set of data to provide some evidence to put a mitigation option into place.
And including in our schools.
Absolutely, yes. So there's a trout in the classroom activity here as well, where local schools get fish to grow, and then they put them back into the river system. So yes, exactly, those types of getting schools involved is really important. I actually think getting adults involved is really important as well, and because we need action on things like climate change now rather than waiting for our children to grow up.
And I think when you told us that, rain can introduce pollutants to rivers, people might not have thought of that. But that comes down to our behaviour, doesn't it? It comes down to what we throw away, how often we drive our car, CO2 emissions. It's really all interrelated. You can't separate human activity from the health of our rivers.
That's right. I mean, we have so many people living in our river catchments that our human activities impact on the river system, and driving along the road network, for example, causes wear and tear on our vehicles. The wear and tear of plastics and metals, etc., they find their way, unfortunately, into our river systems. All sorts of choices we make day to day in our lives do affect our rivers.
And I don't know if I can put you on the spot, but you are Professor Kate Heppell. If I was looking at all the vegetation on the river that we're staring at now, the River Chess at Lettermere Park, in this Affinity Water podcast, the third in our series on river health, I would just say, well, I know my listeners aren't going to like this. There's a few weeds on that river bank, but how many different species of plants can we see?
Oh, how many? It was multiple species, tens, hundreds of different species around this catchment.
Hundreds.
And what you would consider as a weed, to me, isn't a weed. It's the right plant in the right place.
We're just listening to the farm machinery because in the background, throughout our chat, they've been felling trees as well as plants. There's trees along the river.
Oh yeah, as our river temperatures warm, in response to climate change, we're going to have to think more about riparian shading as well.
Riparian shading?
Yeah, so this is shading from the bank. So essentially growing trees on the bank and plants in order to shade the river systems a little bit so that their temperatures don't get as hot in the summer. What we're seeing in the summer when we have our sort of heat waves is river temperatures, certainly of these shallow chalk streams, reaching temperatures over 20 degrees centigrade and temperatures that may cause problems for fish populations. So I think that's going to be another area of activity moving forward where we think about how we help our river systems. If we have this in combination with low flows, of course our river temperatures increase because we don't have much water in the rivers and therefore the temperatures will rise further.
I have to do a plug for Affinity Water because it has embarked on a tree planting scheme by 2030 in line with other water companies across the UK to cut CO2 emissions. So this is an example of how planting trees can help river health. And we also have conducted our Save Water, Save Our Streams campaigns with 170,000 people signed up, which also helps cutting our water consumption at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about how we use water is really important. As a nation, we use a lot of water when we compare it to other countries. And I think that's something moving forward, especially again with climate change, will be causing changes to our water balances in our catchments. It is part of the story and part of what we have to consider, as well as the kind of products we use around our homes as well that make their way into our rivers.
Kate, we're walking a bit further along the River Chess now. Down goes a tree. Just back to those weeds on the river bank, would you be able to go back to your office, feed in some data and say, well, look, we know that, for instance, non-native species can be bad if they're introduced, if seeds suddenly blow into an area where they haven't been before. Is that something that concerns you, something called INS?
Yeah, so invasive non-native species, are problematic in many of our catchments actually. So you've got plants such as Himalayan balsam, for example, that is problematic along the riverbank and will outcompete native species. So that's not my area of research, but certainly that's something that is a growing agenda in the rivers, and thinking about how we tackle non-native invasives is really important.
And that brings us back to where your expertise is, finally, Kate, and you've given of your time generously, so thank you. Back to the complexity of the ecosystem of this chalk stream that we see flowing healthily before us.
Yes, exactly, and the complexity is the exciting thing about these river systems, I think, and I think visually it's really pleasing, isn't it, when we see that complexity, when we don't just see a bare concrete channel, when we see the plants in the channel and by the channel, and the riparian, the bankside areas as well, vegetated, and we understand that that's providing a habitat for the invertebrates, for the fish, for the birds, as we're seeing and hearing today.
By chance, who have we just bumped into? Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Paul Jennings. I'm the chair of the River Chess Association. Kate and I and Alan Beachy have been working together for a number of years with students from Queen Mary University doing projects along the River Chess. We decided that it would be a very useful thing to supplement some of the data that we've already gathered relating to the river life and the river fly life here, and maybe utilising that as a baseline and then adding to that. And Kate has very kindly helped us out with the SON data, which is fantastic data, and it gives us an opportunity to compare that with some of the other data we've got and build a really clear picture of the way that the river's moving.
Well, let's just, both Kate and Paul, let's just move over to where the data systems are, and let's just have a look at them. I've described it as a giant bottle in the river, but it is actually helping you improve the health of the river, Paul.
It is. The bottle shape really is the protective casing which surrounds some fairly sensitive data gathering equipment there. It can't be left unattended. It needs to be looked after, it needs to be maintained, it needs to be cleaned on a regular basis. But it does gather data every 15 minutes, which is very important to us because in the past, when we gather data about river fly life, it's once a month. Sometimes if there are incidents on the river, people will come in and gather that data, but sometimes it will be too late because the problem has disappeared. The thing about rivers is if you have a pollution incident, it happens at one point, it moves downstream. Within a day or so, it could be gone. Whereas this data gives us a consistent record over a period of time.
Well, lots of farm machinery in the background, as I keep commenting. But I asked Kate if 5 years ago you would have had data of this kind, and certainly quantity of this data. Although you could get data, surely now you're just getting more of it, which helps you to do more comparisons.
Well, what it does, it gives us consistent data over a long period of time, and it gives us that 15-minute interval. So it picks up things that wouldn't necessarily be picked up from previous data. And to be quite honest, a lot of that data just wasn't available. The equipment has changed, it's moved, it's become more sophisticated, so it gives us the opportunity to gather this data over longer periods of time, and it's becoming more robust. This is just one of 4 sites that we've got on the chess. It's gathering some excellent data, and we're looking to supplement that with an expanded programme.
And Kate also tells me that she can monitor it and have the data fed into her mobile phone. So are you constantly monitoring your mobile phone?
Not my mobile phone, because my signal isn't particularly good where I live, but we've got reasonable broadband, so I can pick up information from my computer.
Now, it's also part of citizen science, isn't
Yes.
it? That if people want to get involved, this is one of the activities they can help with.
Yes, it is. As I said, these bits of equipment can't just be left. They need to be maintained, they need to be looked at, they need an overhaul. Citizen scientists can assist with that. They can work on keeping these things clean, and it also invariably is in locations where other bits of data are being gathered. Sometimes it's flow data with flow gauging, and other times it's where we are gathering information on river fly. So there's a whole suite of opportunities. Am I optimistic? I'm optimistic insofar as the general public have got behind this. The general public now see these as issues. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when we started campaigning, very little was known about it. If I went into a village hall and gave a talk and told them that there would be raw sewage going into their rivers, there would be that jaw-dropping moment where the whole audience, their jaws would drop instantly and there would be an audible gasp. Now people are much more aware of it, and they're turning around to the politicians and saying, this is unacceptable. We are a developed country, and in a developed country we don't anticipate lovely chalk streams like these, or any river for that matter, being used as an overspill for sewage discharges.
And so Kate's secondment for a year to help monitor the health of the river Chias, that's important. That's a step forward.
Kate's involvement is hugely important for us because we have somebody who is an expert in their field, who can guide us, who can set up systems. It's not just the data gathering process, it's the fact that we're establishing procedures and putting in place the right type of equipment and the right type of teams of people to ensure that we get the right data and it's accurate data, because we can only really work from data, and without that data we can't move forward.
And you're optimistic too, I know, Kate, about citizen science.
Yes, I am. I think it has a role to play in river management moving forward, and we're only just starting to really investigate how we can all work together in this way to improve the health of our rivers.
And would you be able to just give us, the general public, some tips on how we can improve river health? Perhaps we know that we've got to sort of drive less to cut CO2 emissions. We know, as you said, about saving water in our homes, save our water, save our streams, which has been a successful campaign launched by Affinity Water. And of course, all those chemicals we use in our homes too. But if we're walking by the river today, what could we do to help improve the health of the river? 3 things?
3 things. Well, I think we should get involved in the citizen science initiatives, actually, that are starting up to actually understand the river system better. And in that way, we can decide how we're each going to make our own individual contribution to improving the health of the river system. You know, people have very different skill sets and different interests. Some people are on the technological side and would like to get involved with sensors, for example. Other people are fascinated by the biology in the river and really interested in getting involved in riverfly initiatives. We've got groups of people in the chest that really like to go out and monitor the flows in the river system and understand what's happening there. So I think it's a different activity for each person depending on their interest.
Right, well, thank you very much indeed for talking to this Affinity Water podcast. Professor Kate Heppell, and by luck and by chance, the Paul Jennings. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.